welcome to this episode of the iDeas podcast. With me today is Mr. Simon Date, the Adapt Freelancer himself, which is very much the topic of conversation, as it turns out. But before we get into anything beyond that point, we'll address the real reason people tune in. What are we drinking? So, Simon, what are you having today?
I've gone very mainstream hipster. I've gone for the Brewdog Punk IPA. It's very affordable. Well, it's not okay. It's not affordable. Okay, it's not affordable. But it's relatively affordable for the cool IPAs.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And it's always available. I always think
exactly. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
When you don't want complete rubbish, but you realistically are going to a supermarket or a kind of pub that serves normal people, it's going to be the best you're going to get.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Well, I am very dull today. I have got a can of Pepsi Max, not by choice, but because we were away for a couple of days. We've come back, and I have no opportunity to go to the shops yet. And it is slightly too early in the day to be breaking out spirits, I feel. So it's just Pepsi Max for me today. Very disappointingly. So obviously I've given a very brief start to the episode, but over to you for a proper introduction.
Yeah, my name's Simon, as you said. I run my own business called Adapt Freelancer Limited. It's the Adapt consultancy company, I guess. I also have a kind of sub business built out of that called Adapt Unlimited, which is a hosting business. So I provide hosting and support for teams who are using Adapt. That's kind of introduction. It's like to talk about how I got into this position.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think probably weirdly one thing I think we should address straight away, which we shouldn't have to address, and we'll come on to that later. But what is Adapt?
Sure. Obviously, there's a lot of responsive e-learning offering tools, and they've become a lot more popular in the last 5 years. Obviously, Articulate Rise, all the other mainstream offering tools have kind of gone more responsive. People aren't really using, obviously people are using Storyline and those kind of tools, but they all kind of have a legacy look to them. These newer tools have become a lot more popular in the last 5-10 years. And I think Adapt was probably one of the first ones of them. And it's an open source product. So it's, free to download, free to use. It's a kind of developer, it's not as user-friendly to use as the kind of mainstream offering tools because it's kind of built in it's built as an in-house tool. That's the history of it was an in-house tool. And obviously it has been used for commercial purposes, but it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's probably a good way to put it. Obviously, it's very extendable.
It has the feel of what I would describe as the open source feel to it, right?
Sure.
Far more time is put into making it a really powerful tool rather than making it incredibly easy to use, I would say. But I think there's been a lot of progress, certainly compared to when I first installed it to when I used it more recently. I kind of went, oh, this is a little more... just the installation process seemed to go more smoothly, to be honest, even at that stage. So I think... But I think that the biggest thing that always stood out to me about it is, even now, as you say, when other tools they are bringing in more responsive elements, they are making things better, is that it's still available for free, that even if, because I say it's free to a point, I guess. It's free if you're willing to do everything yourself. But even if not, I think the major benefit of that is the amount of community support there is, the amount of even just community content created, be it with the plugins, is unlike any other authoring tool I've found. Because the community everyone always points at Articulate for its community. It's great, but it can't create anything for you. The community can't create. Oh, we've improved the authoring tool. The community can share ideas and highlight problems, which go onto a very long problem list to solve for Articulate. But they really care. Don't worry, it's definitely on the list. It's item 6,000 and so on. Whereas, I kind of feel like in the Adapt community, there's a lot more discussion about how do we create something that fixes this problem. And then 6 months later, someone goes, "Hey, I've done it. Here's the plugin. Come and download it." Which is very different, I think, to how a lot of us see authoring tools, but
Yeah.
maybe isn't so different to those who are kind of in the world of, well, even in the world of online gaming. It kind of had that kind of late 90s gaming feel to it. It was like, I've created a mod pack to solve this problem with this game, which is nice to see.
No, I think that's a really good, that's a good analogy. And like, I with Adapt, they have this like, whenever they do an update, they have like a patch notes kind of thing, and it reminds me a lot of like patch notes for like online games that you play, and like, you can see all the changes. It's like, oh, this is really cool, and like, I don't know, Articulate, I think they update maybe like once a year or so. Like, it's a lot less.
Yeah,
frequent.
you get a lot of little updates, and they certainly sometimes it's just like, oh, it's a bug fix. You're like, okay, cool, it's a bug fix, whatever. Whereas I feel like in Adapt, you get to properly look under the hood.
Yeah.
You get to, if you wanted to, you could go through everything. You could if you were so inclined. Don't, but you could examine every line of code, and you could dig into it, and you could change things if you really wanted to, which I think is fantastic. And I think it's more. I'm always a bit shocked when businesses don't even view it as an option, because it's open source and these kinds of things. And I think, well, that would give you total control, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I guess
Absolutely. And like, I just don't know why companies aren't more scared of the idea of like putting all their content on a cloud-based authoring tool. And like, what happens if that company goes under, like the servers, if that company goes under and like they just switch off the lights, they're like, maybe they'll keep the authoring tool running in like a maintenance mode, but like there's probably no guarantee of that. And like, it just seems very dangerous, like, to do. And like, when you have these two ideas of like development of the authoring tool and hosting of the authoring tool and the maintenance of it, and if you decouple those two things, it's a lot more like foolproof and a lot less risky.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like, I offer hosting through Adapt Unlimited, and like, I'm going to put my hands up and say, obviously, I'm just like a one-person company. Like, there's, if that company fails, then at least I could be like, okay, I'm going to export all your data. This is like a drop, database drop. I can just send it to you. You can host it yourself. Goodbye. But I'm not planning on doing that. Anyone who's listening, but yeah.
No, but I think it's a really good point, because I was discussing this with someone the other day, because they said, "Oh, we've authored everything in Rise." I was like, "Oh, okay, poor your learners." But we've decided to move on to a completely different tool. How do I download my Rise courses and upload into this other tool? It's like, oh, well, you can't. Rebuild them all. Have fun.
Yeah.
Whereas Adapt has this. Again, because it's built around being an open source tool, if you switch from one instance of Adapt to another, be it a paid or a free instance or a different paid instance, you can just download them and upload them somewhere else.
Exactly.
It just, because again, I think because it to me, one of its big benefits just as a tool in general is the simplicity. The output code makes sense. Whereas you open up, whether it's an articulate file or a Captivate file, you put it in front of someone and they go, "What is this?" There is no sense to this. I always remember showing the back end, like a storyline output file, to someone who works in a kind of web-based coding environment, and he said, if I did something like that, I would be sacked and I would never work again. It's like, oh, okay, that's interesting. It's just because none of the rules around how to construct something are there. It's just lumped together.
And I mean, I haven't really used Storyline. I use it like very occasionally. My first job I had in the learning industry, like 5-6 years ago. But like, I read articles online about like how to, make XAPI, do all these different hacks, and it's like you have to download the file and like find this very specific thing, and like, it seems super complex and convoluted. And like with Adapt, it's like you create an extension, you find the extension online, you just add it to your project, and it's done. Like, that JavaScript code that adds that functionality you need is done, like Google Analytics or like something like that. So it makes it so much easier to do the kind of real life extensions and changes to courses that you need. And Yeah.
And I think that, to me, that's always, that kind of simplicity is driven by the fact that it's an open source project.
Yeah.
So no one's adding stuff with the view of making money in terms of the original content. The tool itself is always going to be available, and therefore it only gets an add-on if it's going to add a genuine value, as opposed to adding marketing spin, which I think is so often what we see from standard authoring tools, if you will. They go like, what was it? 360-degree images. And everyone was like, Articulate's added 300. Great. How many times in a year are you going to use that?
Yeah.
Like,
Or like VR
meanwhile,
or something. Yeah.
text still doesn't work properly. You know, I still can't align text as I want to. That's surely more important. But it doesn't sound as exciting, does it? Articulate fixes 10-year-old text alignment problem versus we've launched 360-degree images.
Yeah. No.
Whereas you always feel like whenever there's a new release of Adapt, it addresses either very real problems or adds functionality that people were really asking for, which is great.
Yeah.
So with the kind of initial what is Adapt and what's so great about it sort of question answered, I guess the natural follow-up question is, what was it for you that made you go, this is going to be the cornerstone of everything I do?
Yeah. Well, I was, so a bit about my history. Yeah, like I said, I started in the e-learning industry about 2015. I first had a job, like a 3-month contract for like the NHS, doing some e-learning. It was like straight after university, and like I was looking for like developer roles, and like I had like a few offers, and they all kind of fell through, and I kind of felt really like screwed over at that point. And I was just like, oh, whatever, I just want to take a job just so I could start like making some money, and then look for a proper coding job afterwards. So I took this role for this hospital in London, and that's when I started. I think I was using Captivate for that project, so I kind of learned a bit about the e-learning industry, and I found it quite interesting. My final year project at a university was this like testing application. So I guess it was like, I think a lot of people get to e-learning through education, and a lot of people like teachers and the ID side. But I guess for me, obviously, it was the development side, creating like ed tech apps and stuff. So after that contract, I was looking for like e-learning jobs, and I found one in Brighton for Kineo. I used to live in Brighton. I went to university there, so I was kind of looking to move back to Brighton, and took this job at Kineo. And Kineo obviously was the like founder of Adapt. Basically, they created it, as we said, as an open source, an in-house tool. So obviously, it was built to solve an in-house development problem. It wasn't built to be a marketable authoring tool. But yeah, they obviously built this really good framework, and they made it open source so that more developers could come on board and work on the product. And obviously, it would like ease the development burden from them and share it amongst other companies. They also developed the authoring tool as well, which again we've talked about a bit about as well. So yeah, I was working with Adapt for a year and a half, and I like you said, all the good things about it, like all the plugins and the community and I mean mostly those two things. But yeah, like it definitely was like compared to other authoring tools, which were just like, I remember when I started that job, I was working on Captivate, and just realizing what I was asked to do. I was asked to work in this like 16:9 thing, and I was just like, what the fuck is wrong with this? Like, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Sorry. Okay.
No, go for it. It's, trust me, I've said far worse things about Captivate. That's.
But yeah, like it was just like I was like, wow, it was like 2016 at the time. I'm sorry if anyone has to use these tools today. But yeah, like obviously I was just like, wow, I didn't realize. I think Steve Jobs had did the whole like Flash is dead like 5 years ago, and I was just like, why are people still using tools that look like this? So I was just like, I want to work on something cool. And when I was researching the job at Kineo, I obviously found out that it was a responsive authoring tool, and I think they sent some examples, and I was like, wow, this is kind of stuff I want to do. And obviously, so whilst I was in that role, obviously I learned more and more about Adapt, and I, wanted to do more development stuff, like coding stuff. I was still quite in a more content development focused role. like e-learning developer role. So I was trying to like get promoted within the job, but there wasn't really any positions available. And then there was like, I was also looking into like moving to London because a lot of my friends were living in London at the time. So then there was this like post on the Adapt forum from King's College London, and they were looking for an Adapt developer to basically join the company and guide their development. And like, it was just like one of those things where it's like, looking back at it, it was like the most perfect. You know, I told you how I got screwed over with jobs before, and like I felt like I was like really far back in my career, and this was like the perfect role that I could have at the time. And I remember walking into the interview, and like, they were just like, "Oh, have you heard of this authoring tool called Adapt?" And I was like, "Yeah, I mean, I think I work at the company that you know makes it, open sources it, all that stuff." And they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." It's like they called me back after like an hour after the interview, like, "Yeah, you got the job." So that's good. So this is
sometimes those moments just come up, right? And you look back at them and think,
Yeah.
wow, how did that happen?
It was perfect timing.
That's
Exactly
awesome.
what I need. I wanted to move to London, and you know, it was a really good opportunity. Yeah, the job was really good. Obviously, I really liked working for a university. It was a really good environment, and I was at that role for about 2.5 years. We were mostly like the team was very focused on like kind of improving the product. So there was lots of like component and extension development, all of which you can see on the Kings Online GitHub. So I was really in charge of pushing that forward, and you know, I had a lot of freedom, and a lot of trust was put into me. You know, it was a really good opportunity for me to like kind of learn about myself, and kind of like, yeah, I really enjoyed that experience. And yeah, a lot of the role was also like kind of like training the team. So I mean, there was a team of about 30 or 40 people in this like distance learning team. Yeah, so it was a really big undertaking. Obviously, they were like trying to become the UK leaders in higher education. So they were like very ambitious with what, you know, a lot of funding, internal funding. And yeah, obviously I was in charge of making sure that their e-learning content looked really good and had this styling, and had everyone in the team knew how to replicate it when they were building courses.
Yeah.
So obviously a lot of my job was like documentation and training, and kind of walking around from desk to desk supporting people and stuff like that. So it was a really good role, and I guess it made me think of myself not just as like the hands, not just the person who was doing stuff, but also kind of the brains, and being able to like kind of help teams to guide where they're going and stuff. So yeah, towards the end of that role, I was, I mean, I was kind of looking at going freelance, like, well, not, I mean, the original plan was to kind of do it as like an evening kind of freelance, like weekend thing. I just thought making a bit more money would be good. And yeah, so I kind of, I think a few people contacted me on LinkedIn, and they were like kind of asking me about stuff, and like I was trying to like work out stuff for them. And eventually I created a website so I could like kind of get potential clients to come there. And it took like 6 months from the website being set up to them actually like my first paid project. Well, first project.
Yeah.
So yeah, like that kind of came along, and then I had another big like a client who had wanted lots of work from me. So like I very quickly went from, I think within the space of like 3 months in 2018, went from from my first project to like, wow, I'm making more money from working 10, 15 hours a week than I am for my full-time job. Oh, sorry, there was another thing as well I should have mentioned is I was very interested in this like digital nomad life, and like kind of working remotely, and like I really wanted to go. I never got the chance to go traveling, and I really wanted to do that. So like, I think my intention was to like go down to part-time at King's, and then work a bit whilst traveling, and then eventually come back in like 6 months' time to full-time. And this is like a kind of I think we called it like a sabbatical. I don't know, that was the official term for it. I mean,
Yeah.
but then I signed like a new kind of contractor thing with them. So I was working for like 15, 20 hours a week for them, and then also did freelancing on the side, like with a bit of permission from them. But yeah, I kind of realized that I was more interested in this freelancing kind of like, with my knowledge and expertise, I could definitely like go into organizations and like help them out with Adapt, and it was I think also at King's there was this sense that like they were very Moodle based, and with an external authoring tool, when you're one of those teams that has like the need to like constantly modify content, because every time a class ran, they would have to like go back in there and make changes to it. So it was like very time consuming, and like I think the general consensus was is they just wanted to have like a Moodle only approach so they could make better use of their like Moodle features of like duplicating courses and stuff like that. So it kind of made sense for both Kings and for me to kind of like phase out our relationship. I started finding a lot more freelance clients, and they obviously were sad to let me go, but I kind of quit early 2019, and yeah, since then I've been full-time freelance for 3 years plus.
It's sad to hear people on Moodle. That makes me cry.
I think it's okay. I mean, like it's a similar open source product that, you know, you can build plugins and stuff, and like I do think the UI.
Yeah. I think that's it. Yeah, I think my issue with Moodle is more the thousands of poor commercial implementations of it that I've experienced, as opposed to the core product being bad. I think very rarely, especially in the digital space, is a core product bad. I think they're just usually used badly. Which I guess can also be applied to Adapt, right? If you take Adapt straight out of the box and go, just put your content into the authoring tool side of it, you kind of go, well, it works, but it's not going to win any awards kind of thing. It is all about, it's one of those tools where you have to learn it quite well before you can really get the best out of it, I guess.
The thing with Moodle, especially because it's like an LMS, especially if you're using it in like a university or like a higher education setting, it's very like, they're very process driven organizations, and they're very slow to react, and like they want to have very safe, and so they have these like big contracts with kind of faceless corporations. That's kind of the sense I get. I mean, that's what like our like King's Online team, this like development team at King's was like we really wanted to like change the UI and like do radical stuff with Moodle, and they were just like, no, we need to use, this is a Moodle site that we're using for like our general VLE purposes across the whole university, and like you're the afterthought. And like I was really lobbying for like why don't we have our own LMS, because our learners have a very specific need, which is quite different to these like VLE people that but now pandemics happened, obviously I don't know what's happened with universities. I imagine the VLE is probably very center stage, but
No, but I think that's quite that element is quite common. I think even in sort of corporate L&D, there tends to be the element of the L&D department who wants to scream, for the love of God, it's 2022 now. Could we move forwards, please? And then there is that, no, this is stable, this is works, it's functional, we're staying here, kind of thing. Which is not always the wrong call, you know. There's always, if you, for instance, live in the bleeding edge of tech, you know, it often goes horribly wrong because it's new. This is the typical argument for, at best, you want to be one generation behind the bleeding edge on your production side, so that if everything on the new end falls apart, you're fine. But just to be kind of like 2020-ish even would be lovely in some scenarios, as opposed to 1920-ish. It's
that's a good way to put it.
That's it. But, so I'm really interested. So I guess you focused more in that development role on the framework as opposed to the authoring tool.
So we had I mean the team had an authoring tool. So obviously there was like 10 content developers, like maybe 10 instructional designers, and a few like maybe 5-6 graphic artists. So like that was the team of people we had. So we had a single authoring tool that we used for the content development side, and obviously the development I was doing in the framework, because I was building like plugins and themes and things like that. So for those who should I explain? For those who don't know, Adapt is like two products. There's like the framework, which is the kind of code-based version of Adapt, and it's basically the output files of the course. I guess you're working more with like closer to that, whereas the authoring tool is like a separate product, which is on like a cloud-based product, or like a server-based product, which is used for kind of configuring the framework remotely and then publishing files which you can download on your computer. So
because I think that's it. It tends to be for instance, it's the authoring tool that I
sure.
spend time in. Because I'm not clever enough like you to be messing around in the framework. If I touch it, it'll implode, and that'll be that for my instance. But I think that to me, that's one of the great strengths of Adapt, is the separation of those two things, and how you can then have someone like yourself who is very adept at being able to go in and say, create this, create that, but then everyone with the authoring tool can benefit from that work. And whereas you want to create, I don't know. Well, you want to create that in anything else, you basically have to have it created, then copy and paste the file around. Someone inevitably changes something or deletes the file or does whatever. Whereas this really does allow you to effectively build the authoring tool your company wants.
Exactly.
Or needs.
That's the thing. Like I've worked with so many companies who like Adapt, with 5 hours of work, you can make Adapt look pretty good. But like if you have the business need to invest 500 hours, you can do crazy shit which no other authoring tool can do. And like if you have very specific business needs, like you have like single sign, I don't know, like there's just some, like if you have a business requirement which no other authoring tool can do because it's a very niche requirement that no one else can do, then obviously an authoring tool allows you to open source product allows you to do whatever you want.
Yeah, and that's why it always surprises me when we speak to people and they're like, I don't know about Adapt, I didn't know this, I don't know what's going on. I think it's one of those tools that just doesn't get enough love.
I mean, there's no marketing budget, so yeah, that's probably why.
But well, yeah, this is it. I think it's a combination of that, and I think I would say, this is a double-edged sword. So I think the main challenge for me is like when I first found it, I was an individual freelancer, so I wasn't going to be setting up a server for employees. I was going to be using it for me. So I did the obvious thing, went, great, how do I install this? And then I was met with, this is how you install it. And luckily I kind of went, okay, so I worked in IT. Granted, I was on hardware deployment and setup and network infrastructure, but I get what this is. That's fine. However, immediately I kind of clocked, this is why people don't go, everyone should use this tool. Because for many people at a local level being told, so to install, the first thing you'll need to do is go to GitHub and then you'll need to open command prompt. People get that far and go, nope. I'll go and install Storyline. It's fine. It's a couple of clicks. But the flip side of that is it's the best performing video on my channel by far. So I think guides work well. I don't think it's actually as complicated as people make out. But I suppose there's the flip side of this, which is where Adapt Unlimited comes in from yourself. So I guess I'd be interested to hear a bit more about that and what kind of led you to go, right, this is something that I need to offer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working. I think I launched Adapt Unlimited in January 2020, and at that point, I'd been freelancing for about a year, and obviously, like I said, the way I kind of see my business, I'm not really working with end clients. I'm mostly helping teams who are using Adapt. That's kind of what I see my skill set as. So I had this one client who really wanted to start developing e-learning themselves, and they wanted to use the authoring tool. I think they had previously worked with another Adapt supplier who created like a really nice theme, and they wanted to go make content using that theme. So I was going to like install the authoring tool for them on a server, and then like we were originally talking about like, okay, I'll get an AWS server, and then I'll charge you this amount upfront to set up the server, and then I'll have a bill from AWS coming in every month, and like I'll forward that bill on to you, and then you pay me every month. And it just like was super messy. Like it would have been like a lot of admin, a lot of like pain, a lot of like, oh, so what would have, like, if the server went down and I had to fix it, then would I just bill them per hour or some stuff like that? So yeah, I think I originally went for that customer, but I was like, okay, this is not, because like this isn't scalable, this isn't a good approach. So yeah, I decided to launch this like new business, Adapt Unlimited, and I created the website, I created all this other stuff, and I thought of like a fixed price, which I thought was pretty competitive for what I was offering, and like broke it up into two, like a hosting only fee and then a hosting with like support, training, all the other stuff. So like for the money you're paying, you're getting like unlimited access to me for like £1,500 a year. It's pretty good value. Like, you know, it's better that like I said, I was a full-time employee and doing that role, so you could get the same experience for like a 30th of what I was paid in London. So like, yeah, it's obviously I'm not trying to sell myself too much here, but yeah, obviously like so
No, but I think it's important to talk about it, because I feel like it's one of the big hurdles to getting Adapt out there more and more, and certainly more companies using it. Is a lot of companies don't want the responsibility of hosting an Adapt server, and to an extent, I can see why. The other part of me does say in-house is surely something you should want to do, but I guess it's my net infrastructure head comes on and goes, "No, we're a SAP and Microsoft house. Nothing else is allowed in." And I go, "Oh yeah, I remember that." That's so. But this is a way for people then to basically say, "Well, you're going to do the hosting. You're going to basically just give me effectively a website that I go to, like any other cloud authoring tool. Log in, and
exactly,
I'm going to have access to Adapt." Which you know, it turns it into one of the more accessible authoring tools out there, like anything else, but still with all the same benefits.
Exactly. Yeah, like you know, you have all this freedom. You can install whatever you. I don't like, you know, other Adapt providers. You're like a tenant, and you don't get to choose plugins. You know, they do that for you, which obviously has some benefits. Like they do the curation for you, but it's obviously you don't have any freedom.
Yeah.
You can't export your courses. You can't do all those kind of things. Whereas for, you know, I say like do whatever you want. This is your instance that I've set up. You have complete freedom to, you know, I don't manage the authors you have. I don't manage the plugins you have. You can do all that stuff yourself. And yeah, like you know, the curation side is obviously important. And I have my site called Adapt Tips, which is also this other venture that I've kind of set up, which is like providing kind of free tips and tricks on how to use Adapt. And I have this like plugin checklist, which is what I use is like the curation side, where, you know, whenever I start a project with a client, I normally go through this resource with them, and I kind of say like, hey, this is some of the best plugins you can be using. This is where you can download them from. Let's decide which one you want for this project. Tick, tick, tick. And I think that's the best of both worlds. They still have the freedom. Like if in 6 months' time they want to download some crazy thing, or like they want to make their own in-house, you know, maybe they hire a developer, then they have that freedom in the future, but they're not like restricted, and but they still get the benefit of having the best recommendations.
Yeah, no, I love that, because it's a classic example of I got very excited about it, and I started working with some people. And I said, "Oh, you've got to try out this authoring tool," and they immediately went, "No, I'm not doing all that." So then I went through this massive thing of, right, I'll need to you know, open Proxmox, set up a virtual server. I need to do this. I need to connect it to that port. It just for a couple of people to have a play on it for a couple of days. You know, it's not it's not viable. And I think it's a classic example as well of, whilst big businesses obviously can use this, I think it's a tool, and specifically an externally hosted instance like yours would. For small businesses, it allows you to get away from 16 by 9 without buying into a horrendously expensive proprietary platform. Because when you look at,
I mean, Articulate's like £1,000 a year, right? That's really expensive, but like there's people like, exactly, one author, I mean, Evolve's like 400. It's a bit cheaper. Like, I think what's the other one? Elucidapt's like they don't announce their prices, but it's up there. So like, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, if they don't tell you what the price is, that's always a pretty bad sign. Like, it's a cool tool. I've had a play on it once, and I had one discussion at a conference about the cost per user, and just kind of went, no.
But
I'll see you later.
I think this is definitely where each authoring tool has a very specific market that is like Elucidapt in particular is very much focused on like, if you're a large like corporation, like you have like 10 different offices, you want multi-language, you want analytics of when people are doing, because it's all in-house, it's pretty easy to do, and like they have their target audience very nailed down, and they can kind of lead that person. And like,
absolutely,
I really think it's very healthy that the e-learning authoring tool industry has these niches that, like, you know, like Adapt is very focused. Like if you want to do some weird stuff and you are willing to like invest in learning how to do it or hiring the right people to do it, then obviously you can do it. And Evolve is like you said, basically just Adapt that's like on Rails. Like, you know, there's a lot of benefit to that. I really recommend it for probably the majority of people because it probably is simpler than Adapt. Like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think Adapt to me has always stood out as the tool as you'll need to invest probably more time than you might
Sure.
think compared to the others. But once you've invested that time, I do feel like it is
Yeah.
more of an actual investment because you can genuinely, once you get to a certain point, you can do things that, like you said earlier, exist nowhere else. Once you get into that kind of plugin
Yeah.
and extension development space, whereas no matter how much time I invest in storyline, more than I wish I did in life,
Sure.
it will still just be storyline. I cannot do
Yeah.
anything that no one else can do. Which is
Yeah.
so often what we look for, right? We look for how do I make my
Yeah.
e-learning
And
not feel like
I guess
e-learning?
the idea of like
Well,
innovation being a bottom-up approach where like anyone can come up with an idea and then create it if they can, get the resources together. Whereas like other authoring tools have this top-down approach. It's
yeah,
like we're forcing you to do this, we're forcing you to use 360-degree video, we're forcing you to use all this other stuff, and it's a very heavy-handed approach. And obviously there are benefits to that, like, but yeah, I don't know.
yeah. But I think, like we said right at the start, it's that benefit of very simplified user experience usually indicates more restrictive in terms of what you can do with a tool, right? Whereas, okay, the Adapt user experience may not be heavily refined, shall we say, but you could do just about
Absolutely.
anything you wanted to do with it. So yeah, I think it's a fair trade-off for most people. It's maybe not the best tool in the world to start with on day one of maybe I'm interested in e-learning, but it probably is a good tool
Yeah.
to focus on further down
No,
the line.
it's weird you said that because this guy reached out to me and he was like, "Yeah, I'm really interested in looking into e-learning," and like, he was like, "Can I try free trial of your Adapt Unlimited thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, try it." And then like we had a call afterwards, and he was like saying about how he was recommended it, and in fact, the guy who recommended it is now an employee at Intellum who created Evolve, and he was like he recommended he recommended Adapt to him because he was like, it's free, it's good to use. But I was like, why not use Evolve? It's like a lot easier. It's like 20-30 pound a month, and it's like that's good enough. If like you're not a web developer, you're not like doing the custom stuff, like it'll be easier if you just want to build a portfolio. It's better to have a more on Rails thing, and there's good tools out there that let you do that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose the flip side of it is that having it as a kind of
Yeah.
next step is not a bad thing. I think it's something to build up to. So, for instance, like when I first opened it, I had never even considered looking into any
Sure.
form of coding
Yeah.
as part of my career. And it was that tool that kind of went, this is what you could really make use of
Yeah.
if you just learnt a little bit. You don't need to make it your focus, but just knowing a little
Yeah,
bit goes an awfully long
and
way.
that really helped me in my career getting a lot better at web development stuff, like being able to look at under the hood of how plugins work and look at the JavaScript, and you can see when you make this change, this happens, and having that freedom is a really good learning experience, and having the community of people where you can kind of post on the forum and do that kind of stuff. I was on another podcast like 4 or 5 years ago with Kristen Anthony, and she used to be an instructional designer, and I think she moved to become a web developer, and we were talking about Adapt, and she was saying how that's how she learned, and having that freedom, she really enjoyed having that as an option. So yeah, I think that's really important. Yeah.
A good skills tester for when we get bored and want to learn something new. Cool. So I mean,
Yeah,
we're
it's
rapidly
fast.
coming up
Yeah.
on an hour. Actually, that's come round quick. But I'm always really keen to sort of give people a bit at the end, a bit of time at the end to kind of talk about what's next, what's on the horizon, what are you excited about at the moment. Yeah.
Like
Your
industry
current
wide or
thoughts.
like Adapt wide. Personally, I don't know.
Well, yeah, we can we can talk about the fact the weekend's coming
Yeah.
up and the pubs are open, but maybe industry wide.
I mean, yeah, this is the thing, because I'm so specialized. I feel like I'm not like a instructional designer. I don't have like much knowledge of like beyond the tech side. So like, I yeah, I know obviously that there's been lots of buzzwords like VR and like gamification and like all this kind of stuff.
Yes. That's all there has been about VR. Let's be honest. Every year for the past 5 years, been this is the year of VR, and they're going, really? We're still waiting. Come on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is there anything kind of coming in the tech space specifically, I
For
guess,
learning?
that you think is going to be
Yeah.
useful for learning, or anything just interesting, to be honest? Because I think we could do with being more aware of what is in the tech space more broadly.
Yeah.
Let's
I
put it
mean,
that way.
I don't know. Obviously, longer term, like the kind of like metaverse. I mean, not like in the way. I think now it's very focused on VR, but like, in 20 years' time, we'll probably have like a microchip in our heads, right? And like, that sounds very. I don't know. Like, that sounds very like conspiracy theorist. But like, you know what I mean? Like,
No,
I think
I get what you mean.
we've become like. If you told someone 20 years ago that we'd have a phone and you'd have it always by your side and you'd always be, you would be so connected to it, and like you'd be calling a taxi from your phone and like doing all this kind of stuff, like I can't see why in 20 years time technology becomes more, we are connected to the internet through our brains, and obviously I'm sure we'll be like in our 50s, 60s, 70s by then, and like the kids of today will be like, why don't you get this technology? And like, obviously
And we'll be the ones going, technology was fine 30 years ago, leave it alone. But it's interesting though. Like I was in the office yesterday, and we kind of what technology would actually. We were talking about how technology right now seems to almost be at trivial steps. Like a new generation of phone comes out, and it's like, there are X many more megapixels in the camera.
Yeah.
It's like, great, that'll make my life better. We don't need the advancements that we're seeing. We're kind of just seeing marketing advancements. And we were talking about what is the next big jump. And funny enough, things like the idea of neural link was that kind of, we'll remove the device, be it a headset, be it a phone, be it a whatever. And actually, to me, that's almost when VR would become viable, weirdly. As long as you've got to strap this big thing to your front of your face and see some slightly dodgy animated graphics, it's just not there yet, kind of thing. Whereas the day I can just go, I'm going to activate that file, and it just does it. That to me is when it will be like, that's the vision that VR wants to be, but
I
can't
think
quite get there.
That's a good point. Yeah, and it'll
be quite interesting. But I also think there is, even now, I'm seeing increasing crossover from like web development into kind of the maybe not the strictly speaking I'm an instructional designer L&D world, but certainly into the broader learning sphere. Be it all the new sort of cloud-based tools that are coming out, and I think more of us thinking about how we can harness it. So like you heard it here first. It's not very exciting, but I've started trying to figure out how we can do things like automated accessibility checking based off a sort of finished SCORM file. Because there's all this stuff for websites where I can type in a URL and it'll go, there are this many accessibility issues on this page, or this kind of thing. But I don't have anything that I can literally go, here's a exported SCORM file from Storyline or Adapt or whatever, drag it over and into it, assess that for me, and give me an accessibility report. Just a small little tool to do that.
I mean, in web development, you can
exist.
do the sales, the thing in Chrome. I don't know if that works very well on e-learning packages, but
yes. It, unfortunately, for a SCORM package, because it's a rubbish file format, it doesn't do it. Because it can look at the individual screens, but it means I have to sit there and do the e-learning to get it to assess each screen and then pull off each thing. What I want to do is literally just drop the zip folder over, and 20 minutes, even if it actually has to view every screen and load it up in real time in the background, I don't want to have to do that. I just want to be given a PDF or a screen report that says, these are the issues. Like, that would save, I mean, just in my workflow, it would save like a day per content development in terms of doing the accessibility check. And sitting there with a literal kind of Excel spreadsheet going pass, fail, which is not an efficient use of time. And I think that's where, especially like web development, can really start helping us out more if we had a better understanding of it. Which, in fairness, I don't have. So it's going to be the next outsourced job. Is creating
in general.
this
Do you think e-learning teams are getting bigger? Like, do you think, like, the average e-learning course being built is done by more people than it was 10 years ago, or do you think it's like shrinking? Do you think it's like just one person's doing everything? Because I've heard some, I personally think it's increasing, but like some people think it's decreasing, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's shrinking. I think weirdly we have I think the skill set that is demanded of the industry. I think individuals are expected to have a broader set of skills, but I also see, especially in sizable businesses, I'm seeing the team size grow, and I think that's because companies are becoming more ambitious. Partially through necessity, the last couple of years have basically said move your stuff online or fail. But also, I think even before that, there was an awareness of, the industry is starting to move. Tools are moving on. I think we see that as well in the moves made by the 16:9 content platforms, in that they're realizing this is not going to last much longer. We are legacy design at this point. We need to move on. They're not doing a very good job moving on, but they're doing their best. Rise was a valiant attempt. Unfortunately, it looks like Rise. But I do think overall bigger. But I think at the other end of the spectrum, we're also seeing far more one-man band or 2 or 3 person teams expected to do more. And that I'm not sure is necessarily a good thing, if I'm honest. Because that team will never get to develop, for instance, web development skills, because they'll be so snowed under. All they'll be able to do is look at the next thing. They'll never get to dedicate an hour to doing a bit of research, and turned out they wasted their time because whether they're trying to create a plugin or whatever, it doesn't work. I think that's the fear within businesses is, what do you mean I could invest all this time and it turns out it doesn't work?
Yeah. I mean, with e-learning development, there's generally like 3 skill sets. There's like technical skills, there's like instructional design skills, and there's like graphic skills. Those are kind of the 3 areas. I'm sure there's probably more like project management and like other things which are like a bit more abstract, but like
but broadly speaking, I think I'd agree. And I always think you get the best results by having an expert in each of those, rather than one person desperately trying to master 3 skill sets. It's definitely. I would agree with that for sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much for making the time to come on the show. It's been really interesting. And we'll make sure that in the description we'll have links to obviously the Adapt Tips podcast and website. There's some really great stuff on there, and to your site and Adapt Unlimited. So there is now no excuse not to try Adapt. You don't want to follow the video guide and install it? Not a problem. Just head on over to Adapt Unlimited and give it a go. But Jay, I think it's
just some, and your YouTube video is really good. That's how I discovered you, and I really appreciate obviously you promoting Adapt through that. And looking forward to having you on my podcast maybe in the future. Who knows? One day.
one day. I'll embarrass myself very quickly when it turns out I know nothing. Okay. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. Before you do go, hit us up in the comments. Let us know if you're already using Adapt. If not, when are you going to start? Maybe if you want to, share some of your work. Show us what the tool can do in your hands. Whether you comment or not, make sure you like the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and most importantly, make sure you tune in next time.